Who's in the hot seat? We're going to find out next on Beyond the Locker Room. Another week down, and the picture gets a little clearer for some teams and gets much murkier for other teams. And today we're going to discuss, I'm going to go with a bit of a different format. I'm not going to focus really as much on three particular games, but more like three particular teams who I deem to be kind of like in the hot seat right now. I always kind of look at the week heading into Thanksgiving as where we're heading down to the home stretch. And right now, certain teams really need to kind of get it, get on the horse right now and start moving if they want to position themselves in a good position, not just to get in the playoffs, but also see if they can get back into some type of advantage of getting home field. So we're going to go through three teams. We're going to discuss the Bills, the Lions, and the Steelers, and kind of, I can give my thoughts on where I think these teams are right now and, how dire it might be for them. So let's start with the Buffalo Bills. This is a team who I felt, even from day one, after the miracle win, at home against the Ravens on week one, I mentioned then when I did the pod that week that, hey, Bills fans, don't feel that great, with the miracle comeback. You still have a lot of work to deal with, and that defense wasn't saying much. Since then, the defense has gotten, it's been very hit and miss. Still don't think in this case here they can stop the run. And hold and kind of keep teams at bay when need be. But now on the offensive side of the ball, I think I think certain guys they thought will break out, like Coleman and others they thought would break out this year. It hasn't really, the receiving core hasn't really popped this year. And I think what they saw last year may have been an aberration. Now, more people have an opportunity to scout them with the kind of with the receiving core they have now, putting a lot more. Playing them on the run more so now and putting it in the, Josh Allen's hands and his arm and to see if they could get him out of trouble. And I'm not going to lie, this past week against the Texans, it felt a lot like early Allen, man, where you look at, running around with his head cut off. The offensive line is atrocious. The decision making was questionable. And then also, too, as I said before, the skilled positions, aren't getting it done the way you want them to be a real Super Bowl threat. They right now, they're seventh right now in the AFC. They are at the moment, I would say, obviously they're going to have a first round. They will not have home field advantage at this point. It's going to be hard for them to catch the Patriots. I think they still have one more game against the P-Men, but it's going to be tough for them to kind of get back in that top spot in the AFC East. And, not saying they're not capable of winning road games. I think they can, but if your defense is still looking like that, and now all of a sudden the offense is making bungling plays where the turnovers, Allen had 2 picks this past week. The fumble in this case here, the catch and the fumble, these are things you can't be doing if you want to be a playoff team. It's gonna be tough for them, man. Moving down the stretch, and I would be concerned. And if they don't get it done, say even if they get a 7 seed and they get knocked out in the first round in that wild card or that wild card game, or they don't make the playoffs at all, which would be a disaster. I think heads are gonna roll. And I think the coaching staff's gonna be in a lot of trouble, man, because things right now don't look good. And it's been something where you've been knocking on the door for a bit, and the excuse has been, oh, we can't get past the Chiefs. Well, not quite in this case here. They've been beaten. They've been beaten by the Bengals. They've had their moments with other teams where they've taken their licks. It's not just the Chiefs. So at some point, you're gonna have to say enough of the excuses and get it done. I think the Bills roster, they've cut back on some finances in this case here. Based on Allen's contract and a few other big names. They've tried to bring in big names on the defensive end. It hasn't quite worked out that way. Initially with Von Miller, and they keep on kind of rolling the dice on that side of the ball. But I think right now the Bills are in. They're on the. As I said before, they're on the hot seat. Definitely red alert time. In Buffalo, and I listen to some Buffalo radio, and man, yeah, you can hear the panic in the announcers' voices in the talk shows right now, where there is very much a lot of concern, as there should be. The Detroit Lions. This is their week, actually. Thanksgiving Day coming up. They host the first game as always. The Lions are always traditionally on Thanksgiving. And this is gonna be this stretch is gonna be big for them, man. They got some big games coming up here with their division rivals. Honestly, Detroit is another team where the defenses look pretty putrid at times. I mentioned just a week or two ago in one of the episodes where Goff to me is not the answer in big games, and you're gonna be playing some big games against your division rivals, and we'll see. I mean, they lit up Chicago earlier this year, but that was a different Bears team than what we're seeing now. And of course, you got the Packers as well, too, and the Vikings are still frisky. So it's going to be interesting to see how they manage that going down the stretch, especially if also playing some like NFC conference rivals. I don't know if Detroit makes it, folks. I really don't. Their saving grace might be we'll see what's going on with Baker and what's going on his shoulder in Tampa. That might help their cause a little bit, if Tampa starts to slide even more. But they're 8th right now in the NFC, and I am right now would be very concerned as a Motown fan right now, at Ford Field, because things aren't looking great right now. There's concerns with your quarterback and concerns with your defense. Those are things you do not want to be concerned about. So before, I got love for Dan Campbell. I like his get down, but he's gonna have his work cut out for this stretch, starting this Thursday. Because I don't know if they're going to make it too, man. 8th in the NFC in a tough conference. We'll see. I mean, they're relying on the running game. I mean, I think there's going to be a point where they're going to stack it. They're going to stack it. Defense is going to stack it up on them and see if Goff could beat them. And, if he's grooving, he can do it in this case. That's one thing with Detroit. If they're feeling that day, they can look like the most explosive show on turf in this case, kind of a remake of the Rams back in the day when they got it going. But if they don't, they're not a team in this case that can they can't kind of grind it out. They're not a grinded out type of team. And as we get late in the season, the weather gets bad in a lot of places where they got played. You got to be able to grind it out and win some games ugly. And that's not Detroit style, man. Detroit style and finesse, explosiveness, looks good, pretty, and it ain't going to be that way moving forward. So we'll see what happens with Detroit, but it's day 2, I think, just like the Bills, might be on the outside looking in when this is all said and done. On the hot seat for sure. Team number 3, my beloved Pittsburgh Steelers. I put a tweet out Sunday as I had to sit there and watch that nonsense. And I said, I've never said this before. I'm a Steelers guy. I live with the black and gold, but I said it straight, man. I said, look, man. When it's all said and done, the Steelers deserve the fate they get. This is what happens when you're too hard ears, we like to say in the West Indian community. You don't want to go and take your medicine. Instead of them actually drafting with their first round pick a quarterback. No. Not them, man. Decided we could put it in, roll the dice here with the 40-something-year-old and see how that's going to work out over 17 weeks. Okay, here we are now. Here we are now, week 12, wherever it might be, 11 games through, 6-5, and you're right now on the outside looking in the 9th spot in the AFC. And it took no time for Baltimore to catch you. No time. We're missing their starting superstar quarterback, and they still caught you within no time without even having to play you. Think that through, folks. If this wasn't like Baltimore caught them in this case here, and it was like, okay, it was like Ravens, Steelers played twice in 3 weeks or something. But no. This was going on here, just collapsing. And it was bad enough with Rodgers right now. You're going to tell me now with Mason Rudolph? That's the other thing, too. They pay the money they pay for Rodgers in this case. It was bad enough putting that much money into a 40-something-year-old quarterback. But if that's the case, try to find a competent backup. We've been down this road with Mason Rudolph. Are you kidding me? And don't tell me it's like, oh, the Steelers offense is so complicated. Give me a break. I watched Steelers offense for like 8 years. It ain't that complicated, folks. It ain't that complicated. Look, man, I don't know. I love me some Mike Tomlin, but it might be time for us to get a change. If we could trade Tomlin for another team that's interested in him, has like Super Bowl ambitions, and we get a first-round pick out of it, maybe a mid to late first-round pick out of it for compensation, I would consider it, honestly, because right now, I know the Steelers don't like to do much on the first round except just make their selection. Steelers don't do anything. We don't try to move up. We don't try to move back. We don't try to acquire more picks. we just take our pick and just draft as if that's the only rules that they have in the game. At some point, we have to kind of take some chances. I know it's not the Steeler way, but at some point you got to take some chances with what you're doing here. The defense has gotten old right before our eyes, and it's looked absolutely atrocious at the moment here. Don't get me wrong, I think Watt's been decent enough, but boy, that contract, man, it might age rough when it's all said and done. It might age rough. Hayward, same thing. The secondary, which is supposed to be a strength this year, we bolster it. We're still like, still holes like Swiss cheese. I don't know what to make of it, man. Like a Steeler defense, I heard a stat they said the other day against the Bears game, where I think this is the most yardage per game by the Steelers. Don't quote me on it, but something like in 40 years or maybe an entire. No, I think it's for the entire franchise. You can believe that? The entire franchise? Are you kidding me? No, I couldn't believe that. So if anyone didn't want to put the comment in there to see if I was hearing things incorrectly, whatever the case would be, the point was the defense stunk. In other words, and I don't see how you're escaping that. You still got Baltimore to play. You still have other big games coming up in the AFC. Like I just don't see, and you're playing in a tough conference in the NFC side. You got to play the NFC North. So good luck to you on that. I just don't see them escaping. I just don't. I think you're gonna have some rough games coming up, and I think right now this might be the first time Tomlin might actually have a streak broken where he is not a winning coach and have a winning record, possibly in his last year as a Pittsburgh Steelers coach, and that's unfortunate. But they wanted to roll the dice with a 40-something-year-old quarterback and kept the band back on the defense. Well, actually, freshening up on the front line, and some of the draft picks we had are decent, but no one's really popped this case. Even Porter, who has been a nice DB, but hasn't really been as impactful in my mind as I would like to see him. The Steelers are probably going to just be blown away. Just be like, memories blowing in the wind, man, when it's all said and done in about a couple weeks from now. Anyways, folks, my last point here, locker room takes. I'll just say this. The Shedeur Sanders experience is going to be something fascinating to see in Cleveland. That's all I have to say. Now, I'm not saying he had the greatest game in the world, but just see Myles Garrett's face said it all to me. Where it's like, oh my gosh. I think someone made a joke on ESPN. It's like, hey, Garrett had to look like, wait, quarterbacks can do this? Our quarterbacks are allowed to do this? Yeah. And if nothing else in this case here, he put some more people in the seats, if nothing else. Like, what's Cleveland got to lose with that? So, let's see what Sanders has. They have some decent skilled players around him. And, once Judy's not fooling around with the ball in the middle of the field, and some other guys keep dropping balls because they've been dropping, even with Gabriel's passes, he'd be hitting them right in the helmet, and these guys dropping passes. So, they can just keep their focus for a little bit, see what the kid has, man, see what he can do, man. I'll leave it there for now, man. But thank you again, guys. As always, man. You can find me on Twitter, X, or wherever they call it these days, Blue Sky, of course, Facebook, and right here on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate the support that we're getting right now. We're starting to build a little momentum, and I thank you very much for the support. Once again, you can check me out weekly on Basketball Rewind with the fellas, Coach Roach and Kenyon. And once again, guys, take it easy out there. For all my American friends, don't eat too much turkey. And we'll talk next time. Keep it locked. Peace.